Hi, welcome to SpinetiX webinar module number 4. In this presentation we're going to cover a number of topics, including how to configure our control center to ensure the device is set up the way you need it to be set up, the video wall configuration for creating projects on multiple screens, basic interactive project creation, and how to run our instant messaging samples that we have available on our website. Let's quickly overview some of the features of our platform, just to refresh your memory. The deployment options include the Fusion mode, which allows you to use a standard web browser such as Firefox, Explorer, Safari to push content onto the player and then manage that content in the templates, playlists and timing of that content. The additional ways to manage the content is using our Hyper Media Director software or any other HTTP client to push the content across a network or the internet onto the players, and this will then let the player play it from its local internal storage. In pull mode, we can put the content onto a remote server, and the remote device can then access that server and pull the content from the server as it's required and store it locally in the player. This is done based on a schedule which is defined by the user. In server mode, we can push the content to a remote server at any time, and then the remote server is then accessed by the player and the content is played live off that server. If the server communication is lost, there is secondary media format locations which can be used. Under the standards that we support within our operation of the device itself, we support a number of open standards which allow you to use open source tools to manage the content and the player itself. These tools are freely available and the standards are easily understood. Doing a little research with Wikipedia or the managing body who looks after that standard. We also support a number of different content standards. This content is done either by SVG, Scalable Vector Graphics, which is another open standard managed by W3C. SVG is an XML language and it supports JavaScript and PHP script. We also support Smile 3, which is another open standard defining the replay of content on a screen and timing of that content. We can import PowerPoint or Flash files using a simple drag and drop operation. This is non-interactive content, so the content must play from beginning to end to be able to be imported using Hyper Media Director. Alternatively, there are other tools available to export PowerPoint and Flash into video files, and this may be considered also. Our data exchange is done using XML, text or comma-separated value files. These are all, again, open standard files that are text-based and can be edited and managed using third-party tools. We also support RSS and iCalendar. These are all open standards which you can research on Wikipedia or on the standard site that manages these file formats. The media formats we support are quite wide. These are all documented very clearly on our support website, and if you go to support.spinetiX.com, it will give you an up-to-date list of the standards that we look after and accept, and the file formats and maximum file sizes supported within the player. This information is updated regularly and managed by our support team on a daily basis. So if new standards are added to the device, they will appear within the support site. The Control Center configuration interface is a web-based interface. To access the interface, there are several ways to do this. The easiest way is to go to a web browser and type in the name of the device in either Bonjour format, IPv6 or IPv4 format. You can see here the numbers, the formats of those commands. You type that in to the top of the browser window and this will then access the content accordingly. You can use a Bonjour plugin such as DNSSD, Foxy Proxy, and there are a number of others such as Flame for the PC and the Macintosh and iBook and iPad. Another way of finding out the IP address of the device to manage it is by pressing the blue button on the front of the device. This will then call up a blue square which will show you the IP address or the host name of the device. Either of these can be typed into the web browser window that you're working on. The final way to locate a device is to utilize the Hyper Media Director interface, and this is a right click over the device you want to access, and it will then allow you to manage. This will then automatically open up a browser window with the Control Center interface. Once you're there, you'll notice that the information window will give you the status and information of the device, and then there's the administration area, which will allow you to configure the device and make changes. So we're going to quickly jump through to a player, and the easiest way to do this is by I'm using my DNSSD plugin on Firefox, and just by selecting the device I want to manage, we go through to it. This will automatically connect me to the Control Center interface, which you can see here. The basic window that opens up is the status window, which gives you the firmware number, the operating temperature internal within the device. This is configurable in one of the submenus. The IP address of the device itself in IP version 4, and also the device name and multi-screen ID. The MAC address is the same as the serial number of the device. This is really very useful. And the other thing, it'll tell you about other devices that are connected. For example, I have an iMation flash drive connected to this particular device at the moment. You can also grab a screen snapshot of the device, and this can be updated easily by hitting the refresh button. So every time I hit the refresh button, it will pop up with a new window. If you select the actual window itself, it'll open a full screen image of the device, and this address is easily available just by typing that in or creating a shortcut that will then allow you to look at the output of the device live at that moment. Under the display information, this will give you information about the way the device is configured, the resolution and refresh rate. It'll also tell you the output that it's connected to. So the display device for this example is a Panasonic TV with the product ID, that's the product number, manufacturer, and if available, we also be given a serial number. It's up to the manufacturer if they include this in the EDID information. As you can see, the device is currently powered on and it's registered as such. There's no VGA connection to this device at the moment, so it's not displaying that information. When I select the storage information, it will give you information about the internal storage of the device, including the system storage available, as well as the content storage available. This device currently has around about 7.5 7 gigabytes available for its internal storage, and you can access that. If you'd like to look at the content within the device, you can select the server address and click on that, and that will take you straight through to the device itself, and we're now looking internally in the device. If I select a file, for example an image file like this logo, when I select that, I'm now looking at the logo being played back from the internal storage of the device itself. The log files are very useful. There are a number of these files, including an accounting log, which logs the files that have been tagged for accounting, and this allows you then to create chargebacks for people and identify what files have been played and who to charge for them. Additionally, there are other log files, including an info log, which actually logs all files that are being played on the device, and as I scroll down this information, you'll see that we'll come to an area where there is something else that's been accessed. So here we have the frame buffer was changed from 1920 by 1080 and so forth. The other thing that you can do is review warning logs, updaters and resources. All of the information about these log files is available on the support wiki at support.spinetiX.com, and you can find out anything you need to know about how to read these. We now move to the administration area, which is where we can configure the device. Under the display settings for the device, you'll notice that there is a range of standard resolutions that we can set the device to manage. You select these simply by clicking on the button and then accessing those. Underneath that, there is an enable audio output, which will disable the audio or enable the audio output out of the device, so that if there is media with audio, you can turn this on and off in the device. The force aspect ratio selection is really important. If you have a device that accepts a specific video resolution, but the aspect ratio of the screen you're pushing it to doesn't match that ratio, you can select the force aspect ratio, which will then allow you to force the same information across the correct aspect ratio. This can be very useful when managing different devices with different aspects with a common content. You can also rotate the information on the screen, so that if you have a vertical screen you can create that content vertically and then select the display to be correctly orientated on the device itself. Under the power save settings, you'll notice that we have a power save setting which allows you to set the time that the device turns on and turns off the output of the player. If the power save settings work on the display device you have, this will then tell the display to turn on and off based on the sensing of the video signal. This is entirely managed by the display device. Under the device power save settings, you can also tell the VGA output to be selected appropriately, whether it's automatic, always on, or always off. If for some reason the VGA display you're connected to does not have the correct pull load on the cable, the correct impedance, you can turn it to be always on or always off. The automatic feature should manage this quite well. Under the interactivity settings, there is a setting to enable the events. If you enable the events, this will then allow you to use mouse and keyboard on the device, and that will assist you in building and managing interactive content. Further down the screen, you will notice touchscreen calibration. If your device is a touchscreen and you need to calibrate, simply selecting the touchscreen calibration procedure will set up the calibration on the screen. You're looking here on the right hand side. This is a live output of a player in my office, which is showing you the calibration tool set up. If I stop the procedure, it will then return back to the content within the player. Under the splash screen, you're able to set the output splash screen for when the device boots up and shuts down, and this is user selectable as required. The advanced settings allow you to create different content output resolutions based on the device you're connected to. This has a check feature incorporated, so that if we wish to put 1680 by 1050 on this particular display I'm connected to, and I wanted it to be in a VESA standard, and if I then select the check button, it'll come up and check to see if this file format is supported by the device that we're going to connect to. If it's not supported, it'll advise you that the standards are not met within the standards in the display or in the player, and it'll then ask you to make an alternate selection. If I go through 1920 1080 at 50 Hz and I tell it now to use a video standard such as HDMI, and I hit the check button now, when it goes out it will see that the device can accept this resolution, and at this point I can select the apply button. This is very useful and very powerful, allowing you to configure the device to any resolution of virtually any display you connect to. There is an advanced feature which will also allow you to actually put in an EDID reference, which will give you the ability to do very unusual resolutions, and if you'd like to know more about that, please review this on our support website. Under the network settings, it's possible to configure the device in several ways, either for the DHCP or as a static IP. If you select a static IP, you just need to fill out the standard information that's required by a typical network device. DHCP will automatically manage that. It's important to remember too that if you have Bonjour operating on your network, when the device connects to the network, if Bonjour is enabled, this will then allow the device to automatically locate itself if there is a conflict on the network. For example, if you were to select a static IP that was already inhabited, it would automatically find the next IP. Under the interface, you can also select your 3G modem configuration, and this modem configuration is information you'll be able to access from your 3G supplier. Both the Ethernet and 3G interfaces are active at the same time, so that if you have got a 3G modem connected, you can still access the device using the Ethernet network. Under the advanced settings, we have a device name and the ability to have the device named as a word, and also the multi-screen ID, which will define the area of the screen that is displayed on the device when you are configuring your multi-screen project, and we'll talk more about that later. The Network API allows you to set the API port where you can which is used for the instant messaging and several other features. If you don't need this, you can just uncheck the box. The standard port setting we use is 1234, but this is configurable and you can define that to be whatever you wish it to be. Network Watchdog, it allows the device to reboot if there is a problem with the device, for example if the content is not working or it can't connect to the network. Under the credentials, you can set up a remote server credential check. For example, if you are subscribed to a secure server and you're going to use that to push content or pull content from, then this address is entered into the server URI, and then the username and password is delivered to that each time you access that remote location. There are proxy settings available, and we also have the SNMP set up. Notice that this is always configured to be disabled in the default mode. This is a security issue. If you want it enabled, you have to go and manage that. Under the media sources, it's possible to configure where your content comes from. So as you can see here, currently it's set to the primary source. If I decide to get a network project from a remote location, such as the network location that I had where my credentials were, http://webdav.mydrive.ch, https. This would then go and pull the content from that location, and the credentials will be delivered when it accesses that. If this location is lost for whatever reason, you then have the ability to define a second network location or a local storage location. The other thing you can set is you can select the storage to be used from a USB device, so that if the internal storage is not required or is not large enough, you can use a USB hard drive or USB solid-state memory device such as a key to plug into this and be used whenever it's plugged in. If you remove it, it will fall back to the primary source location. This particular device has a USB key connected, and at the moment it's not configured specifically so that the device can be formatted if required. So if you noticed on the status screen, the device was the USB iMation flash. When I go back to my media sources, it gives me the option now that if I want to reload it, and it's currently saying it's being used for updates, I can reload this device and it will come up and offer me the ability to format, as you can see on the bottom there. If a USB device is not seen, you can force a reload to re-identify if there is a device on the port simply by selecting that button called Reload. The next area we'll look at is the security. There are 3 levels of security available on the HMP players. The monitoring level, which allows people to access log files and also access the screen snapshot. The content server, which only allows people to publish content or view the storage area of the device. And the admin server, which will allow you to manage all of the things we're doing here to configure the device, publish content, and access all of the monitoring features. These are all configurable independently, and the Hyper Media Director software can store and manage these passwords as required. Under the time and date settings, it's possible for you to configure the device. So at this point in time we have the time zone set for Australia, but it's possible to set that for any location anywhere in the world. Once you have done that, you can either select a manual time setting, which will configure the device to the time and date, and alternatively, if you want to use an NTP server, you can use an NTP server, remembering that the players themselves are NTP servers, and many local servers do have NTP capability. Ideally, if you're using multi-screen, where you're running a video wall application, you should have a single reference point for the timing. This is very important. The NTP statistics will show you if the NTP server is working and how accurate those servers are. The next area we'll look at will be the RS-232 selection. Within this, you're able to select any of the protocols that are loaded on the device already, and you can upload additional protocols simply by selecting the Upload Protocol File selection box here. When you do that, you go through to the protocols that you wish to use. So if I go here to my local protocols, which are under my sample media, I can grab one, for example, a Sharp Aquos, which is already loaded into the device anyway, as you can see here. So these are available on our website, and they're very easy to use and to evaluate to create new ones. You can also set all the configurations of those devices at that point. The pull mode allows you to define the pull mode settings for the remote content. So if you select the manual settings, select automatically upload project, type in the location of the project, including the folder name, it will automatically go and check to see if the content is updated and if it needs to be updated locally. It'll only update into the device the content that has actually been deleted or changed, or any new content is pulled in. Any content that's deleted will be deleted off the player, and any content that is unchanged will not be replaced. It'll just be left as is. You can then select the time that can happen in hours and minutes. You could also push the device logs out to a remote server location, which again you can then define the location for. The other thing you can do with this is to, instead of using a single time schedule point, you can upload a pull mode calendar from a specific location, either selecting it from your local file location or telling it every 24 hours or every period that you define, say every 4 hours. You can then tell it to pull the schedule from that remote server location. This is all very straightforward, and if you need any assistance with that, please review our support.spinetiX.com website. There is more information on this on that site. Under the firmware update, you'll be able to update the content of the device, the firmware content, and this can either be done from a server or from a USB key. If you don't have access to the internet or there is limited access available, you can update from a USB key. Just contact your local partner about gaining access to download that file. You can see here the current firmware I'm on is 2.2.2, which at this point is the current firmware. If I select Check Update, it will go out to the internet, look at the remote server site and verify if there is any new software available for this device. Once it's done that, it'll then show up down here as whether the content needs to be updated or not. It takes a few moments. Once it's done that, it should pop up with a little window on the bottom. So you can see it's popped up and said that there are no updates available, and if you need to, you can also show the update log, which will show you what it's done during that check. So if it does fail for any reason, you'll be able to identify that. Under the Settings tab, you can define the location for that. We recommend that you use a local location if you need to. If you wish, you can use our site or a local location simply by saving that update file to that remote server. You can also enable the automatic updates. We recommend that you do this based on a local server rather than our server. If for some reason there is an update released that is not compatible with the content you're using, it's always ideal to select and check that before you update all of your devices. The updater information gives you information about the updater and licenses. Again, this is information that you can find out about on our support website. Under the Fusion settings, we can enable and disable the Fusion content. When we enable Fusion, it will clear off the content within the device. Please remember that if you are using pull mode, it will be reset and deactivated, and any content will be erased from the device that you're using. So if you have devices, if your device has any content that's important, please copy it off before you enable Fusion. Under the maintenance log, under the maintenance tab, you're able to do a number of things, including restarting the device, restoring the default content. So if we go back to our player now and I select if I select the content to be restore default content, you'll notice that it goes out to the device and restores the default SpinetiX logo. If you reset the device to factory default, this is fairly self-explanatory. It will drop back to the configuration as supplied by the manufacturer at the time that you got it. Very important feature, reporting. If you do have a problem with your device, please ensure you send our support team a copy of the report of the device with the problem that you're having. Simply select the Get Report button, which will automatically call up a file location and allow you to save that content onto your local computer. Include that report with the content that you're sent, with the problem that you're having with the device. So it's asking me, do I want to save this content? And now it's clear that. So it's now downloaded that and it's virus checking that. So there's the SPX report. Just drop that onto an email and that will then assist our team in getting that device out and up and running again. Clear that off. Sorry. Let's just leave it there. Under the advanced settings there is another very useful feature, which is the installation mode. We don't recommend you use any of the other features in this particular page unless you're directed to by the support team. But under the installation mode, this will allow you to make multiple changes on the device without it restarting. This is very useful if you've got to configure the display output, the network settings, the NTP clock, where each one of these will require a reboot. By enabling the installation mode, you're asked each time if you want to reboot or continue configuring. At the point you're happy with the configuration, you then do a reboot and all of the changes you made are applied to the device in one go. Under the hardware settings of the device, you also have a feature which allows you to change the shutdown temperature, which allows the device to be configured to either have a low temperature on the outside or standard temperature, maximum temperature. This does not affect the warranty of the device. If you choose to run the device in the maximum mode, the warranty is still set to the lifetime warranty. The only cause for concern is that it can reach up to 50 degrees centigrade, and if this is a problem where the device may be touched by the public, you may wish to run it in normal mode. Under the backup settings, you can also generate an XML file with the configuration of the device. This is very useful if you have multiple devices to install. You can configure the device, save that configuration, and then restore that onto multiple devices. Or if someone makes changes to the device in the location where you are, you can restore the previous configuration. That covers most of the information you need to know about the control center. The next thing we're just going to talk about will be the multi-screen creation. So let's get going and show you how to create a multi-screen presentation or a video wall. The first thing you need to do when you've opened up Hyper Media Director is to go to the My Projects area, and I'm going to work within this Module 4 Projects folder. I'm going to right click and create a new project. When I create my new project, give it a name, and then under the format or the aspect ratio, you go down and select the multi-screen. When you select multi-screen, this will allow you to define the number of screens and the layout of those screens. You also select obviously the target devices you'll be working with. It is possible to mix both HMP 100s and 200s and different devices and screen sizes within a multi-screen project. That's a little more advanced, and if you refer to our support.SpinetiX website, that can give you more information about that. Once I have my multi-screen sample, if I open up this page, I'm just going to set the background to be white so it's a little bit easily visible, and when I hit the save button, you'll notice that there's a nice crosshatch on the window which just shows you what the layout of the screens are. Top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, and the grey bars indicate the size of the bezel. We can change the bezel size simply by going in and selecting that and then applying it, and you'll notice that the bezel size will vary. We can also go into the screen, into the device, and change the aspect of the device. So if I wish to, I could set it up to be a 4:3 screen, or even a 9 by 16. So in this case we've set 9 by 16 with 40-inch screens with 10mm bezels. And when I hit OK, you'll see that we have vertically oriented screens. I can also go through and change the screen size. So when I go through and change my screen size, instead of 40 inches, I decide that I've got a 105-inch plasma screen I'm going to use. If I hit OK and apply that, it's now 16 by 9, 4 screens. You'll notice that the bezel size is significantly smaller than it was before. If I return back to the 40-inch screen size and hit apply, you'll notice the bezel gets larger. Another nice feature is if you have a 200cm screen, for example a projection, and you apply that, you'll see that the bezel size is managed as well. And we can use inches, centimeters, millimeters, or meters. So the next thing we can do is configure the number of horizontal and vertical devices we have. So if I want one column and 3 units high, you just select that. And now we have 1 by 3 presentation. And this is all configurable and managed by the user. Very straightforward and easy. So we just go through and make this a 2 by 2 again. And the other nice feature you've got, if I change this to be 20mm, actually I'll make it 40mm border. If you're using projection, it's also possible to configure the screens so that instead of having a bezel, you can have an edge blend. So when I go in here to the bezel vertical border and I put a minus figure in, you'll notice that the bezel disappears, but there is a blended border that's incorporated into the device. So quickly dropping an image onto this particular screen, if I drop an image that is easily manageable, for example this, right click and make it full screen. So even though there's no apparent bezel there, up the top of the screen you'll notice what's called the viewer window, which allows you to look at the multi-screen layout. And when I select screen 1, as you recall, row and column, screen row 1, column 1, so top left, when I hit the save button, you'll see now there's a black blended border on the image which is overlapped. And if I select number 2, you'll notice that number 2 is showing. So this is very useful if you're running a projection system. So let's go back and just return this back to 20mm, and again 20mm, and you'll notice when I apply this, immediately the screen returns back to the size and position it should be, and going to my document, it now fills the screens appropriately. Okay, so we've done that. Let's get rid of this particular file which we don't need. But I'm now going to create a presentation which will enable you to see how this works. So we'll just open up some media and bring that into the device. So going into my images, I'll grab a couple of images, a bird, a test chart, a savings. Just drag that and drop that into my project. Obviously remember, try and keep your projects neat, and always where possible use folders. So we have our 3 files, we just drop them into the folder. The next thing we'll do is just quickly grab a video, for example a Coca-Cola ad, and maybe an ad for Poster Digital. So when I apply all those in, I'm just going to turn off the audio settings so you don't hear the audio go through. The first thing I'll do is create a playlist. So make a new playlist, drop that onto the project. You'll notice that the object goes in as the top left hand screen. Simply by moving that and sizing it, you can see straight away that the content can be managed exactly the same way that you manage the content using Hyper Media Director normally. So by double clicking my playlist, I can then go and select the media I want to use and drop that into the device, hit apply, and that's now being played across the different locations. So that's the post to digital ad playing, and in actual fact that's working. So if I hit the play button, post to digital ads playing. So the Coca-Cola ad can sit on top of that, and when I apply that it starts up. I can define all the standard things and features that you have within the normal playlist. What you'll notice is that the media will be synchronized based on time. So if I publish this content now to my player, simply by going into my devices and dragging my multi-screen sample into my player, drop that on my player and saving it. If I hit the connect button on the device, now I'm looking in at my player live on the bottom right. So the bottom right corner is showing my player. Once that content's loaded, it will load up on the screen and you will see the content appear. Currently the content is showing based on the particular area of the screen that we've told it to play. The player at the moment has no multi-screen ID set. It's playing the full image, so the full area of the media. If I go to Advanced tab and change that and give it the name Screen 2-2, this will then play Row 2 Column 2, which will show this bottom right hand area screen. So once I've applied that, within a moment or two I've hit the apply button. You can see now it's playing the bottom right hand corner of the media that's there. So it's now working. There we go, and it's playing the content live. If I want to select screen column 1 row 1 and I apply, it will now switch to the top left corner, which you can see on the left hand side there. Obviously Hyper Media Director is not playing at the same time as that. They're not synchronized. So you can see it's top right, bottom left, or if I remove the name altogether and hit the apply button, you'll see it's back to the full screen mode. This is very useful because if you have the same content that needs to be played on both a video wall and also a single screen, the same content can be applied to both those scenarios. That's most of what you need. The only other thing that comes up quite a lot is people asking to play the content across multiple screens. And this is not difficult to do. So what I'm going to do quickly is just make a new SVG object, and we'll call that quad split. And when I hit that quad split button, you can see that we'll build up a piece of media. We'll put all 4 pieces of media onto the screen. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I just go and drop them onto the player. So when I drop that onto the layers of a particular object and hit the save button, I now have the ability to place those around the screen, which will give me the effect of having a 4-way split on the image. So once I've done that, I hit the save button. If I want to make this appear as if there are 4 separate screens and a single screen and jumping between the two, when I go back to my media, my index file, and open up my index file and put my playlist into that again. So we have in our playlist, we have the 4 individual items, but I can then add the quad split image as the first item and apply that. So what you'll see will happen when I make this full screen, I'm just waiting for it to save itself off. So what you'll see will happen is I can then make that full screen, and that information goes across the whole screen. When I rewind it, you'll notice that the content is the quad split information will be displayed across all those windows. So hitting the save button and stepping out, then the media will appear once it goes through its play loop, and you'll see 4 separate images appearing on the screen. So I'm just going to publish that to the player, and you can see that this player is now playing the full screen image. It's synchronized because of the time of day coding, and when it reaches the end of the playlist, which it needs to do these 2 ads, needs to play this, next ad up will be the quad split. So currently this screen has no user on its full screen, but you can see the appearance will be that it appears on all 4 screens. So that's how you create a multi-screen object. The next thing we're going to cover quickly is the interactive device project creation. So to build a very simple interactive project, we're going to open this up. I need to stress right at the beginning of this that this is a standard project, and we do recommend that any complex content creation for interactivity be considered using JavaScripting. The Hypermedia Director interface does provide a certain level of interactivity, but it's always better to use JavaScript for complex content. So the first thing I'm going to do is to grab some videos. We grab Skating Babies, NASA Shuttle, and Poster Digital. So I grab those 3 pieces of media. Once again, remembering to create a new collection and call that media. I should drag them straight into the folder. So the other thing we may grab is some of our image files. So we'll grab say the test chart image, drop that in, and the bird feather is always nice too. So the first thing we need to do when creating an interactive project is go into my templates, select interactivity, and there are several templates here that you can use. The only ones we're going to talk about today are the menu buttons, which are the buttons you select to pick the piece of media you want to play, and the menu media itself. The menu media being the content you want to play when the button is pressed. The other templates in this window, if you read more about that in our white paper on interactivity. There are 2 menu buttons. The first one allows just the manual configuration of the layout of the buttons, and the second one has an automatic layout with a matrix, making it much more accurate and aesthetically appropriate to load those. So I'm just going to go and drop my menu buttons into my project. You'll notice that object's come in, and I'm going to now select that and place it on the screen and size and position it where I want it across the bottom. When I double click that and open it, under the properties you'll see that I have a maximum horizontal and vertical. I actually want to put 4 buttons horizontally on a single line. And when I hit the apply button, it will now have those buttons in the right size and shape. The other important thing to remember is there's an instant messaging variable. This is the link between the menu media and the menu button. So if the standard default is menu on both items, if you want to have multiple interactive items on a page, for example 2 windows, each one with 2 different sets of buttons, you can change those using this feature. So when we go to our layers tab, you'll notice there's layers available. So I'm going back to my media. Actually no, I'm going to select some templates from our clip art library. So I'm just going to grab maybe some different emblems. So we'll grab a green dot, an important, a love heart, and a globe. Simply by dragging them up and dropping them in, we now have the 4 different buttons we're going to use. When I hit the apply, you'll notice that they've appeared across the bottom. The next thing we have to do is to set what the command that's issued from each button. So I'm just going to have button 1 will send number 1, 2, 3, and 4. The command can be anything you wish, and you also have the ability to drop video into those objects if you want to, and have them repeat loop. So again, to repeat loop, just opening up the more features under the media descriptor. When I hit the apply button and save, those buttons are now fixed and set. Stepping back out into our main project, now I go to my media and I want to pick the pieces of media that I'm going to use in the device, in the player. Just once again, grabbing the interactive template is the first thing I need to do. So going to my interactivity menu again, going to my menu media and dropping that into the project. That's now been dropped in the project, and I can make that full screen. You need to remember to make sure the buttons are always the top layer, otherwise they won't be active. The other thing you can do obviously is to resize the menu media, which will then make it fit within the screen area so the buttons have clear underneath. So we're going to set this to be slightly above that and leave it there. When I double click and open the menu media, now if I grab my media, I can drag that into my project simply by dragging it in and dropping it into the content. I'm going to delete the two placeholders which are there, and the other thing I'm going to do is just add the test chart, which I'll make the first item. Making that the first item means that it will be the default playback, so when I hit the apply button, this will sit there as the first item. This can be configured under properties, which is next page by default, so when it finishes playing any media, it would fall back to the first slide. You can select that to be the next slide that's to be played, or play the same slide again. You can also put the number in there which will define that, and under the playlist itself you can also define the next page afterwards and create a sequence that way. So we're going to give a page ID 0, which we haven't used, then 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the commands that are going to be listened for from the buttons. If I hit apply and save, we've now created a simple interactive project. To test the project, you need to go up here to the little interactive mode. When you select that, instead of having the media being able to be edited, when I select that, now the media is interactive. So when I select a button, it goes and plays that media. Select the next button, it plays that media. This media is set to play for 5 seconds, so at the end of the 5 seconds it should then revert back to the original media, which is the test chart. Wait for that to happen. And just double check that. Going up here, it's an indefinite, set to indefinite, so if we change that to say 5 seconds and apply, so now when I select the button for the bird feathers, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it returns back to the original media. You can interrupt the media simply by selecting another button, and it will jump to the location that you select. So this menu media has been done. It's that simple. The last thing we're going to talk about in this webinar is what we call instant messaging. So I'm going to set that off. So under instant messaging, what we have in our projects, we have the SpinetiX Corporate Expert project. This project's available on the website, and you can download a number of different interactive instant messaging examples from the media application examples. There is one for each of the different areas. The instant messaging ones are called Expert. So any of the ones marked Expert will give you the instant messaging item. So when I open up my instant messaging project, you'll see that appears on the screen. So we have down the bottom a news item playing, we have over here on the right a now serving number, and on the left this is actually a memory location that will remember the information that is being used at the time. So if I can get my webcam working again, if you bear with me, just get that back up and running. I seem to be having a few small problems with it on this particular occasion. Bring it back. When we need it, we'll enable it. So I'm going to publish this project now out to my player again, simply by dragging and dropping it onto the device. So that's being published, and it's on the player now. Before we go to the player, I want to show you how to test it. Within the project itself, we have a file here that says Open in Web Browser. This is an HTML page which you open using a web browser, and the easiest way to do that is to navigate through to the project on your device, going to Internet Explorer, opening up my navigation device. So I'm now going to go to navigation pane, going to SpinetiX, My Projects, go to Module 4, and we have our SpinetiX Corporate Export project. Down the bottom here you'll see that there is a file which I can open in my web browser simply by double clicking it. So I've double clicked that window, and I'll just size that and position it where I need it to be. So you can see here now, the first thing I need to do is to set the IP address of the device I want to talk to. So this is a standard HTML page, and I'm going to first off communicate with the Hypermedia Director. The first thing you need to make sure is under your settings you enable your network API. This will then turn on the API and allow the web browser to communicate to it. The location for this API for Hypermedia Director is called localhost. When I select localhost, you'll notice that that's loaded up into the device, into the web browser window. Immediately when I hit the Call Next Visitor, you'll notice that this window here calls a visitor to that location. And it's possible now to go to that location and call the next visitor to number 2, and so forth. On the left hand side we have a buffer which shows the last 6 items that have been called, and these items appear as they need to. It's that simple. Down the bottom part of the page we have the ability to put instant messages up. So, Mr. Smith, please go to front counter. So as soon as I hit the display this message, in the top right hand corner up comes my message. It's possible to add additional messages and have them cycle through. There is a bird in the foyer. When I hit display this message, it'll go through, it'll play the first message. At the end of the 20-second period that the message has been scheduled to play, it'll then play the second line, which is there is a bird in the foyer. The second message is separated by a carriage return. If I remove the carriage return, then it will display, here we go, there's a bird in the foyer, and if I select it again, it will then reopen that message again. The duration of that message is defined under the instant messaging. If I double click and open, you can see there's an item duration there. The next thing we want to do is to put it onto the player. So if I go to my player and verify what the MAC address of my player is under my status, you'll see that the player's MAC address, the IP address is 192.168.1.9. So if I go here and copy this location, and once again pasting that into this location under paste, and refresh it, set the IP address. When I connect to my player and I call my next visitor, so my live video on the player, you can see that's working quite well on the remote location. Likewise here, this is a test, and I can then display my message on the player itself. If you have multiple players within a configuration, it's very easy for you to select the IP address of a master unit and point all of the other devices to that for their API. That covers all the information we wanted to cover in this session. The only thing left for me to do is to just quickly show you some information about the other areas that you might be interested in. If you want to download Hyper Media Director, visit our website, and there's a download location available there on the front page, which will take you directly to a 30-day trial evaluation software. You can watch some training videos on how to use Hypermedia Director there. You can download some solution examples, which are the things that we just showed you with the instant messaging. Remember, the expert ones are the ones that do the instant messaging, but there are 4 other versions available. You can also check the training dates on our website for the local area where you are, and also the manufacturer training in Lausanne. As well as that, you can download user documentation off our website, and there's both user manuals and technical documentation available there. Support wiki, there's also documentation available, and you can download a lot of information from the site, and remember that is the best site for you to get information, as it's updated daily with the most up-to-date information about the player. If the information you need is not there, send us an email and we'll respond. Help us to add additional information to that site and keep up to date with us as well. Thank you very much for coming. I hope that everything is clear. If you have any questions at all about this webinar, please send your questions to support@spinetiX.com. Thank you very much.